quite often talk about the outcomes that joining in the activity can, you know, benefit your client groups. But before I start the demo today, I really want to talk about one of those outcomes, and that is, you know, like the sort of emotional part of it, and reminiscence is the thing that I want to sort of like talk about most of all right now. We often associate reminiscence with an older generation that are looking back, recalling events and experiences, and scents and smells have such a powerful connection with reminiscence work. The smell of candy floss works for me. It might take others back to their first memory of the village fete, or a trip to the carnival with their boyfriend, or, you know, spitting sausages might prompt memories of the first scout camp. But regardless of our age, we all reminisce to an extent. And I have to tell you that the smell of tomato plants growing in a greenhouse reminds me of visits to my aunt and uncles regularly growing up as a child. And I keep saying this in Zoom, you don't get the benefit of the perfume of the plants that we're working with. And it's only when you're up close to them that you really get that sense of how powerful scent and smell can be for reminiscence. But anyway, my reminiscence is during summer visits to my aunt and uncles, I'd be dispatched out to the greenhouse to pick and bring in a colander full of their ripe red tomatoes. And I'd be immersed in that unique viney perfume. I don't know how you describe it, but I'll call it tomato viney perfume that the tomato plant foliage gives off. That would then be followed up by the most amazing sandwich being made. 2 slices of fresh, thick white bread, smothered in butter, with a filling of thickly sliced tomatoes that we just gathered, with a wee scoop of salad cream and a sprinkling of both salt and sugar. And, you know, if you've never experienced that sandwich, you really have not lived. And I recommend you doing that this summer. If you don't grow your own tomatoes, go into your next door neighbours and pinch some of their tomatoes out of their greenhouse and treat yourself to that sandwich. But anyway, my ramblings bring me back to tomato plants at least. So this is a tomato plant that I potted up several weeks ago. In fact, I think I said to Jenny I worked out it was 4 weeks ago. So it started off as something half the size of this one here. And in 4 weeks, we've got something that is looking really pretty impressive, and lots of nice yellow flowers developing that are going to be the fruits. Excuse me. So I've got 2 plants here. 1, 2, a wee bit different in shape, but these tomato plants are what are termed bush tomato plants. Jenny mentioned the other type of tomato plant in her PowerPoint slides, and that's the vine or cordon variety. They're the ones that need a lot of space. They grow upwards, they're tied in and trained up a cane with their unwanted side shoots and suckers removed, and any excessive lower leaf growth can be taken off also. And this has got to be done on a regular basis. So in short, if you neglect your cordon or vine tomatoes, they really won't thrive and you won't get as good a crop as they're capable of doing. But as Jenny mentioned, if you are looking for activity, then that's a great way of ensuring daily activity in your gardening project. These bush tomatoes are shorter and dumpier in stature. They require less space and there's no need for pruning. So it's almost a case of plant, water, feed, and enjoy. Most bush varieties produce the smaller, some of the cordons do cherry tomatoes as well, but you tend to find that it's the bush varieties that the selection that you can get of them generally are for the cherry types, and they're suitable for growing in containers and baskets. So, got this first wee one here. It's really, I'm going to talk about the colour of it in a wee while, so just ignore that part of it just now. But this is Tumbling Tom Red, and I've got a hanging basket here for it. Now, the basket's got a round bottom to it, so it can be a bit wobbly when you're working with it on a flat surface. So get yourself a flat bottomed pot or pail, something like that, and you can wedge it into there, and that makes it a bit more steady to work with. Now, I found these in B&M, an absolute bargain. Other retail stores are available to buy hanging baskets out of. All plain, you know, it's got its lovely liner, it's got this sort of mop wrought iron effect. I've used these for quite a few years and they really do last a long, long time. So I think they're very good value for money and very decorative also. Now, this coir liner is fabulous for holding in the compost. It lets water eke out and it doesn't let it all cascade out in one go. But what I find, sometimes the coir can be a wee bit thin in the ground, and tomatoes in particular really need their compost to be kept moist, not soggy wet, but sort of like damp sand wet the whole time to ensure good root production. So what I'm going to do is put in my own liner. This is a compost bag that I don't need. So I've cut it up and cut out a circle. And what I'm going to do is just snip a few holes in it because I don't want the water gathering too much in the basket. I wanted to hold on to enough water but let all the excess out. So this is me just adding in my extra liner. Now for this, it's a general purpose compost that I've chosen. Try and buy the best quality that you can get your hands on. That's my recommendation. And also, if you do have a local nursery, you know, like a plant nursery where perhaps like a family-owned one, a smaller one, you tend to find that they still make their own compost, and sometimes they actually sell their own compost as well. So I would go in and have a chat with your local nurseryman or in a garden centre and just ask their advice. So nothing fancy, just a really good quality general purpose compost. This is what I'm working with here. Now, as usual, I've not got my gloves on because I'm naughty, but please encourage your clients to wear gloves. And if they don't, for whatever reason, just ensure they wash their hands thoroughly after the activity before eating or touching their faces, drinking juice, whatever. So I'm just breaking up the compost. I'm putting it in so there's no lumpy, clumpy bits for the fine roots of this wee plant to grow through. I've not filled the basket completely up. Just going to pull my label out so it doesn't get in the way for the time being. And I'm just going to wiggle this pot into the compost bed that I've got here. And the pot that the wee tomato plant is sitting in is about 2 centimetres lower than the rim of my basket. I don't want the compost to be any higher than 2 centimetres shy of the rim. And I'm going to take a plastic cup here. Again, depending on your client group, using a cup might be a bit confusing for them and they might think they have to put the compost in their mouth. But you'll know your client group better, and maybe just to use their hands would be more sensible. So I'm just squeaking the compost in here. Firming the compost down because I want to knock out excess air holes, but I'm not compacting it so hard that there's absolutely no air channels at all in there. A wee bit more compost just to bring it up to height. And the good thing about my pot still sitting in here, the wee plant is supported by the pot round about it. It's not falling about all over the place. Don't have to worry if it's in the centre, it's moved. This is looking good to me. And then I'm going to pull my pot out, plant it all. And I've left an indentation where the pot was. supporting the plant with one hand at this end, and with my other hand, I'm just squeezing the bottom of the pot and out. It pops quite thin. Very healthy root system here. I'm just gently breaking some of the roots just to stop them from any spiraling that might fancy getting themselves into. And then I'm just going to pop this back down into its wee hole. And then thumb and forefinger just firming in round about what I call the neck of the plant. And there we have our tomato plant planted. Now I'm going to take my label and popping it back on the side here, just in case a visitor says to me, which one's that? Once I've taken a tomato off of it, because I've got several growing in hanging baskets now, and I can't tell the varieties apart by looking at them. So I have to pull out my label to let people know what it is. So now I've got my plant in its basket. This plant should have been potted on a couple of weeks ago. It's been struggling in that little pot. It's been struggling for nutrients and whatnot. So now that it's in its basket, it's going to come away beautifully for me. The care of tomato plants, they really need between 6 to 8 hours of good light to promote flowering fruiting. The fruit production, the making of the tomatoes requires energy, and the plant gets that from the sun. But to boost, like the plant's health and that energy supply, we can feed weekly with a tomato fertilizer. This one is, there's several makes on the go. Tomarite is the more popular one, a name that most people can recognise, but you get other varieties as well. And as long as it says suitable, basically it'll have a big picture of tomatoes on it. And this is the type of plant food fertilizer that you really want to be using to feed your tomato plants, because it's NPK, the main ingredients of plant food, is strong in the fruit making ingredient. The good thing about this though is if you have lots of summer bedding outside, hanging baskets and nice troughs with pansies and marigolds and all the lovely demesias, geraniums a lot, this is ideal for feeding them as well, because although it's high in fruit making ingredient, the fruit making ingredient is perfect for flower making as well. It's the same thing. So treat yourself to a couple of these. It's a liquid one. The instructions are on the back. It's normally, I don't know which this one is, I can't remember, but it tells you how many capsules per a 9-litre watering can, something like that. It's really simple to do. Pop the capsules into your watering can, fill it up with cold water, get a cane, give it a good stir round about, and once a week when you're doing your watering, just make sure the compost isn't bone dry when you're watering with feed in it. Make sure the compost is dampish, and give it a good drink of the feed at the same time. Now, this wee plant here, as I say, should have been potted on a wee while ago, and you can see it's actually started to make wee tomatoes here. It's desperately wanting to do what it was born to do, but I know that this plant has got so much more capacity. In fact, tumbling toms, you're meant to get between about 200 to 250 tomatoes off of them. So I need this to be much bushier and much bigger than this one if I'm going to get that type of harvest. So what I'm going to do is cut off these wee flowers, because at the moment the plant thinks all it can do is put all its energy to making these wee flowers turn into fruits. And these wee tomatoes, cut them off. Aren't they dead sweet? So I feel quite bad doing that, but I'm not going to do any more. I'll do that later on. So I'm going to nip off all of these wee flowers. The plant then goes, oh, best put on more growth, so I've got more space to make more flowers that will turn into fruit, and I'll get a bushier plant that will give me that much bigger harvest. So ideal temperatures have been, the last few weeks have been absolutely perfect. for getting our tomato plants up and running. And we're looking for daytime temperatures between about 18 to 21 degrees, but apparently if it goes above 29 degrees, they really struggle. But I don't think we have to worry about that. And hoping to keep the nighttime temperatures round about no less than 13 degrees to ensure that the plants are really, really doing well. These flowers are going to turn into the tomato fruits, but they need to be pollinated. You can hand pollinate yourself, but the best way is just let the bees get on with it. Bees are great for pollinating the flowers, and that's what set the fruit. Now, if it's too cold or wet or windy, there's not so many bees about because they're not as active in those weather conditions, but you tend to find the weather always corrects itself and the bee activity will return to normal. Now, as I mentioned, I've got several hanging baskets now with different varieties of tumblers in them. Oh, sorry, I should have said bush varieties. That's it to begin with. You get the ones that are upright. This is my next one I'm going to show you. And they kind of like just bush out basically. And then you get the tumbling varieties that are the bushy ones, but they tend to be much more cascadey and trailing that lend themselves to this hanging basket style. So you've got several pots or baskets. Don't be tempted to squash them all together because they're in the pots and you can do that physically. Try to keep the plants a good 60 centimetres to 2 feet apart from one another, as they need plenty of light and air to circulate round about the plant and through the stems, which helps deter fungal disease build-up and which can cause blossom to drop and generally weaken the plant. And if the blossom drops, you don't get any fruits, and therefore we don't get to harvest our lovely tomatoes. Probably the most important care element for any plant is the watering of it. As I mentioned, we need to maintain a damp sand-like texture, so it's even consistent watering. Try and just get into the habit of going out every day and giving it a top up. Don't just don't give it a gallon full, on a Sunday and hope that that's what's going to keep it going all week. A little regularly is really important to maintain that texture, not soggy, but not sawdust dry. If it does have fluctuations, that can lead to blossom drop. So again, if you've got no flowers, you'll not get any fruit. And once you get to the stage where fruits are developing, if it's too wet, too dry, too wet, too dry, the fruits don't remain elasticated as they swell. So they start to dry out, and then you give that a wee drink of water, it puts on another growth spurt, and then it bursts out of that sort of like dry top skin. And the fruit is still edible, providing there's no sort of like evidence of like any disease having got into that open wound. It doesn't look attractive and most people would shy away from it. So that is our hanging basket with my tumbling bush tomato in there. What I want to show you now is this other one. I actually picked this bush variety up when I was at a garden show last weekend, and the variety is called Baby Boomer. Now, I've never grown Baby Boomer before, so I had to do a wee bit of Googling. And Baby Boomer, one website told me it would give me 600 tomatoes, the other one said 300, so I'm not going to count them how many I do actually get from it, but I'll be interested to know which website is closer to the truth. So this one is not a tumbler. It's going to grow up and grow more bush-like. So same thing, I've got my general purpose compost, and I'm just going to break it up in my trug here at the side. And then to cheat, I'm just going to go straight in like so. Some more up here. Same idea, I'm just going to wiggle that wee pot in there. Now, actually, before I do that, can you see the lip here on this pot? Can you see that, Jenny?
Yes, I can.
All right, okay, that's fine, sorry.
Yep.
That, if you've got that mark, most pots have got these marks on them, and that's actually a guideline. That's called the watering mark, and that is where you shouldn't plant your compost any higher than that. Even on little pots like this one here, there's a small indentation, and that's this pot's watering mark. Some clever scientist has worked out the volume of this pot in relation to how much compost is in there, how much water is required to keep that compost at a, oh gosh, how to describe that without going into a fancy term that I would struggle to explain, to keep it at the right
Optimum
level of dampness, to optimum, that's the word, optimum level of water dampness, that the plant in here is getting enough moisture without being overly wet. So I'm going to wiggle my pot back in here, and that's at sitting level with this watermark, and I'm going to get my scoop again. Same thing, I'm just going to squeak in round about it. This can help maybe some of your more anxious clients have a go. You know, they're not worried about doing it wrong because they know that they can fill the compost in up until that line. There's no guessing involved. Make up any clumpy bits. Again, just kind of firming it down to knock out excess air holes. A wee bit more. Oops. And that's me just sitting on my water line. Pulling my pot out again, put the label down the side. Same idea, support the stem gently and pull out the pot. Nice wee root system. Pop it back in and firm in and around. Perfect. And that's me, got my water line there. And the idea now is when we come to water this, I'm not going to water them in here. Once I take this outside and get it in situ, I'm going to give it a right good deluge of water, and I'm going to water up to just before it starts to cascade over the side, and that is enough water for this pot. It will slowly percolate its way through, and the compost will absorb that water that you put in there. In a few days' time, I'll go back out, or I'll check it every day, but it'll probably be a couple of days' time when I'll test my compost. I'll put my finger in, and if it's feeling dry down just below the down about 2 centimetres, it definitely needs another good drink. But you're keeping that sort of damp sand-like conditions. So we never spoke about pests when we were talking about the care of our tomato plants. Aphids such as black fly and green fly are drawn to the yellow flowers of the tomato plant, and once there, these wee blighters particularly enjoy the sap from the young leaves. There's lots of biological and non-biological deterrents available, but although there's no scientific evidence to back up my claim here, I personally believe that the scent given off by plants such as mint and basil and marigolds in particular are a good guise to the scent of the tomato plant. In fact, I think it's the scent of the marigold in particular that these wee bugs really don't like. They really dislike it, so they actually shy away from going anywhere near the marigolds. Your marigolds will probably get eaten alive by slugs and snails and things like that, but the good thing is they are keeping the wee bugs, the aphids, away from the tomato plants that can do quite a lot of damage. So outside where I've got tomatoes, I've got marigolds. Many will consider the marigold. I'm a marigold. Here we go. These are some lovely red ones. Who was needing heated up? Hopefully the sight of the marigolds are warming you up now. I think it was maybe Mandy that said that. But the great thing about marigolds is they are really easy and inexpensive to grow. These are wee marigolds that are desperately wanting potted on, that I had potted into. Oops, look at that, look at the root system, desperately saying, let me out of here, give me more compost to live in. So these are the marigolds, and the seeds are even, they're just so interesting to even look at. Wait till we get them out. They're kind of black and white. They remind me of zebras for some smell, for an obvious reason. They don't look like a zebra, but they remind me of zebras. So lovely, wee, interesting seeds to have a look at. They're one of the easiest flowering plants to germinate. So possibly too late to grow your own marigolds this year. You could do it, they will still grow, they will still germinate, and they will still grow, but it'll be like another 4 to 6 weeks before they'll look anything like this. But you can buy them in the garden centres just now and get them growing beside your tomatoes to deter these aphids from visiting. So that's your marigolds that will help keep your pests at bay. As I said, the marigolds, grow them in a windowsill and they'll be raring to go. In fact, mark it in your calendar for next February, March time. A great indoor activity to be doing in anticipation of this time of year. And of course, finally, the really good bit. We get to harvest the actual tomatoes. I'm just looking at the clock, Jenny. I was going to pot up the marigolds, but I think I'm going to run out of time a wee bit. But I would pop 3 marigolds round this pot here so that I've got plenty of marigold life next to my tomatoes. So, as I said, the really good bit, fine motor skills are going to be exercised in the picking of the fruits. Your senses are going to go into overdrive, the smells and the fresh taste of the fruits. And coming together and making tomato salad or salsa, what a lovely way to improve folks' feeling of self-worth, to collect and make something together, then share it with others around the table. So it's a great activity for many, many reasons. And pick the fruits as they ripen, because the more you pick them, the more energy is diverted to growing and ripening more fruit. So that means even more tomato sandwiches to enjoy. Great fun. Thank you, Jenny.
Thanks very much, Joan. I think we're all warmed up now, and looking forward to delicious tomatoes. An absolute treat, and there's so many different varieties. I think that's the lovely thing, isn't there? There's all sorts of types that you can grow, and these tumbling tomatoes are terrific. In terms of not having to give them intensive care and pinching out and having to have a huge polytunnel to grow them in. It's just amazing. So I wondered if I could ask a question. Do these tumbling tomatoes grow really well outside? You were talking about the temperature needed. Do you find that they grow quite well in the Scottish summer generally?
Well, I grow mine outside. I've got a polytunnel, as you know, Jenny. So I grow some indoors and I also grow some outdoors. So my indoor ones are always ready earlier.
Sure.
But they do grow outdoors and they grow well. I'm south facing here though. And they're on a sheltered wall. So south facing, sheltered spot, they'll definitely, I have success. And I'm down in Ayrshire, which is maybe a wee bit milder than you, Jenny, but I get all the wind that's on the go here. I live at the top of a hill. But I guess that's me closer to the sun.
Closer to the sun, very good. There's a question in the chat from Margaret. Margaret, would you like to unmute if you'd like to ask your question directly to Joan, because there's a small group.
Hi there. I'm sorry for being late. It's just I'm about to plant out my tomatoes, and just wondering what size the pot is for the vine tomato, the single one that Joan planted. Just a few
Okay,
minutes
that-
ago.
Yep, okay. That was a bush tomato that I planted.
was it?
It was
Right.
sort of like it was like the kind of upright bush tomato, as opposed to the trailing tumbling tomato that I planted into the basket. But the size of pot that I've just potted that into is a 10-litre pot. So it's just shy of 30 centimetres in diameter and must be about 25 centimetres tall. Definitely 30 centimetres in diameter. But it's a 10-litre pot, if that's an easier way to remember.
Yeah, thank you very much. Thank you.
That's good. I know I've seen people plant them just straight into, those grow bags that you get.
Yep.
Yeah. Is that really for cordon ones if you want to grow them? Is that?
Well, Jenny, in my polytunnel at the moment, I've got one grow bag and I've got a vine growing up. I've cut 2 holes out the grow bag, and one has got a vine. I've got the cane in it, and I've got it attached to cross bar in the polytunnel, and the vine's growing up that. And I've got my cherry tomato, Tumbling Tom it is, at the side of it, and it's taken off. It's going bananas. It's doing far, far better than the vine is at the moment, but vines are slower, and your bush one grows so much more quickly, I think. So yeah, no, they will grow in a pot. In fact, Margaret was asking about if you were wanting to grow a vine, you can grow the vines in pots, but you would need to have like make sure that it doesn't tumble over, like the cane would actually be working to stop the plant from like falling over. But I'm assuming you would have it up against a wall or something so that it's, in the polytunnel, it can be open all the way around about. But anybody that grows vines outside here, they've always got them growing up a wall, or when I say up a wall, against the wall with their cane, so that they've got that protection, something to kind of lean the cane against to tie them into.
Good. Okay. Mandy, you've got a question about feeding.
Yeah. I haven't spelt tomato right, but let's ignore that. I don't know what happened there. Yeah, I get really muddled up with sometimes what is actually organic feed, in the sense of something that's grown organically and then something that's like using natural things rather than animal. So I've tended to just use seaweed feed for ages.
Yeah.
So are the tomato feeds fine? Should I just go back to those?
It's not, that one won't be, that one is inorganic. I'm sure it is. I don't have my glasses, I can't go and read the small print.
Yeah.
I'm sure it is inorganic. But your comfrey, somebody just put in comfrey there, your seaweed, your comfrey, all these seaweed work as well. I think you might just have to top them up a wee bit more. They're not so intense, they're not so what's the word?
Concentrated.
Thank goodness you're here, Jenny. Not so concentrated, so you might find that you'll have to give them a wee bit more every couple of days when you're just using your comfrey feed and your seaweed. But no, if you don't want to use it, absolutely fine. You don't have to. You can actually see the tomatoes that were coming on those little plants that were in those pots that have been starved. The plant wants to produce fruit. That's its job in life, is to do that. By feeding it, you're giving it that extra oomph, you're giving that extra support, because if you've gone to the bother of planting them and growing them, you really want to get as much as you can from
mine are not looking as good as yours, Joan, so I'm going to go and cut those flowers off straight away. I think it's the nighttime temperatures as well. I think they've got a bit cold.
Okay.
But
well, we are, we've been spoiled. We're only into June, and because we've had 3 weeks of glorious weather, and we feel like it's July, because it normally takes this length of time for our temperatures for us to believe that summer has arrived.
That's true. They've got time.
So
they've got lots of time.
Absolutely plenty of time. So don't worry about your tomatoes.
You're quite right.
Okay. Still on the liquid fertilizer question. Is it GTAP? Have I got you pronouncing that correctly? Would you like to voice your question about liquid fertilizer?
Yeah, it's Gita.
Gita, sorry.
That's okay.
Welcome.
The P is for the surname, Patel. I don't know how that happens. So at work here, we started a hot bin, a composter that's completely sealed, and so we've been, but it creates a lot of liquid fertilizer which we have to strain off. So would that be any good for feeding plants, tomatoes?
Now, I have no experience of hot bin composters. I know how they work. I visited one that was working when I visited. So, oh gosh, can I find out the answer for you and let you know? I'm scared.
Yeah,
that'll be absolutely lovely. But I'm thinking it could be really, really rich, and you need to dilute it down.
Yes, yeah.
Actually, like, you know, like burn the roots effectively, and well, then you would kill the plant through kindness. So I would need to do a wee bit of research for you. I'm really sorry. So
No, that's okay. It's very new to us because this is the first time we've been using it, and but it does produce a lot of really rich liquid. It's really dark, and I just thought maybe I could use that, you know, diluted like you said. Yeah. What
do you do with that liquid at the moment?
Oh, I've just got it. I've just bottled it up. I've got quite a few bottles of it at the moment, because I think I do need to drain it. Otherwise, the compost becomes very, very damp, wet.
Yeah.
I've heard that described as liquid gold. You know what you're getting from your composter. It was, well, I don't know. Do you have worms in your compost?
Yes.
You
yes.
do. You do. Yeah, I was visiting a project up in Aberdeen earlier in the year, and they were talking me through their big composter. They had it in, it was a bathtub they had with a lid on, so it had a drainage hole where the bath would drain, you know, so they had a bucket underneath to collect it. But they were saying that actually the fertilizer they got from that was terrific, as well as the compost. But I don't know how much you have to dilute it. Yeah.
Just had a quick Google of hotbin.co.uk, and it's suggesting that you dilute your liquid fertilizer 10 parts to 1. So 10 parts water to 1 part liquid gold, as Jenny called it. And it says just use as you would feeding your plants ordinarily. So once a week for your tomatoes with a ratio of 10 to 1 up here. So yeah, that sounds about right, because you know it must be really, really rich. So 10 to 1 sounds a good dilution rate to me.
Yeah, so would that be like one capful to 10 capfuls, or?
Yeah, basically, yep. So if you've got a litre bottle made up of your liquid fertilizer, you would be putting that in a 10 litre pail of water, giving it a right good stir roundabout with a cane or something like that. And then decanting into your watering can or using the pail.
Okay. Thank you.
We would like to see a picture of you doing that. Thank you very much, Gita.
I'll try and post it. I don't know. I'm not very good at these things, but I'll have a go. I'll try and send it somehow. Yeah.
That would be lovely. Thank you.
That'd be good. Oh. Okay. Any more questions about feeding and
somebody said they use comfrey feed. Great. Vine tomato, should you have only one long stem? Ideally, yes. You're wanting your stem to grow up. You still need stems to come out with leaves on them, but you're wanting to nip out all the little suckers that come. That's your stem, and your leaf stem comes out at the side, and you get a tiny wee stem coming right in at this junction here. You want to always nip them out. They're suckers, they do nothing. And then you'll get your little trusses forming off the stem or off of your leaf stem. And once your stem, once you've nipped out the top of it to stop it from just keeping on more green growth and focusing in on making all those yellow trusses into fruits, you can maybe take off about the bottom, a foot, 30 centimetres, 20 to 30 centimetres of all that green growth at the bottom. Just take that off, get rid of it. Because again, that's it, just using energy to keep those green leaves looking nice, and they're not going to do anything for you. And also it'll let more air circulate in and around the plant to keep the overall health of the plant good.
Great, that's great. Thanks very much, Joan. Any more questions on the intricacies of tomatoes?
Could I ask just another wee question, please?
Sure.
Margaret. It's back to the, I've got two Elsa Craigs growing. One is a straight stem, long stem, but the other one has actually forked the top and developed like a V shape. So I'm wondering if I should just take one of them out and just, so it has one long stem. That's really what I'm confused about.
Yeah, it's just, you know, like it's been growing upwards, and then that's just like a side stem that's decided it's growing, and it's now like that. Which one wants to be the leader?
Yes.
It's vying for kingpinness. So yeah, take the weaker looking one out, I would suggest. And then, you know, once you've maybe got about, I don't know, a good 6 trusses of nice fruits on it, you maybe want to sort of like nip out maybe more than nip out the top and just let it concentrate on making fruit on that shorter stem, as opposed to keeping on putting energy. It's got to take all that, it's exhausting carrying all that food from the compost all the way up to the top. Help your wee plant out.
Right, thank you.
That's great.
Should you start feeding like just now or wait till the fruits appear?
Some people say you should wait until the fruit has set. I tend to do it. I start feeding once I see flowers. When I've got a couple of trusses of flowers, that's when I start feeding them. I don't wait until the fruit has set. I think they could do with it before then.
Thank you very much, Joan.
That's great. That's great. Thank you. Well, I'd be really interested to see if you get 600 tomatoes from your plant.